It had been raining all day, the kind of endless drizzle that soaks through your jacket and makes the streets shine like wet glass under the streetlights. I had just gotten off work from the late shift at a coffee shop, and it was almost midnight by the time I stepped off the bus near my apartment. My neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. The usual hum of cars was gone, and all I could hear was the steady hiss of rain against the pavement. That's when I noticed him. At first, I thought he was just another late-night walker. Tall, wearing a black raincoat with the hood up, head slightly down. But he wasn't moving. He was standing at the far corner of the block, under a flickering street lamp, facing my direction. I pulled my phone out and pretended to check something, but really I was trying to get a better look without making it obvious. The man's face was hidden in shadow, but even from that distance, I could see that he wasn't holding an umbrella. He was just letting the rain drench him. I crossed the street toward my building, and when I glanced back, he was gone. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe he just turned a corner. I went inside, locked the door, and tried to shake it off. At 2:47 a.m., I woke up to a faint tapping sound. It wasn't rain. This was slower, deliberate. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. The sound came again, 3 soft taps. From my living room window. I lived on the 2nd floor. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under my bed and crept into the living room. The blinds were closed, but I could see the faint outline of someone standing on the fire escape. I froze. Another tap. This time it was followed by a whisper. "Let me in." The voice was calm. Too calm. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I backed into my bedroom, grabbed my phone, and dialed 911. The dispatcher told me to stay in the room, keep the door locked, and wait for officers to arrive. The tapping stopped. For the next 5 minutes, I heard nothing but my own breathing and the rain outside. Then, just as faint sirens began to approach, there was a sudden metallic creak from the fire escape, like someone stepping off. When the police arrived, they found the window latch scratched and bent, as if someone had tried to pry it open. But that wasn't the worst part. On the wet metal of the fire escape, there were footprints leading away from my window. Bare footprints, and they didn't lead toward the ladder. They ended halfway along the railing, like whoever it was had stepped off into thin air. I moved into a small rental house at the end of a dead-end street. My neighbors were mostly older couples or families, quiet people who kept to themselves. The only house that stood out was directly across from mine. It was old, with peeling white paint and boarded-up windows. The grass was knee-high. I figured it was abandoned. On my second night there, I was unpacking boxes when I noticed something strange through the living room window. A light was on inside the abandoned house. Not a warm, homey glow, more like a cold, bluish light, the kind you'd get from a bare bulb. I stood there for a minute, watching. No movement. I told myself it was probably just a security light or maybe a squatter. A week later, I woke up around 3 a.m. to get a glass of water. That's when I saw it again. The light was on, but this time, there was a figure in the window. It was just a silhouette, standing completely still in the upstairs room. I couldn't make out any features, no face, no details, just the shape of someone watching from the dark. I stared for what felt like a full minute, heart pounding. Then slowly, the silhouette stepped back until it was swallowed by the darkness. The light went out. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Over the next 2 weeks, the light would appear at random, never on a predictable schedule. Sometimes it would stay on for hours, sometimes just a few minutes. But every time, I'd feel that same creeping sensation that someone was staring back at me. One rainy night in late September, I made the mistake of trying to record it. I set my phone up on the windowsill and hit record, aiming it directly at the house. At 2:13 a.m., the light came on. The figure was back. But this time, it wasn't upstairs. It was in the downstairs window, directly facing mine. And it was closer to the glass than I had ever seen it before. I froze. My phone kept recording as I stood there, feeling that unnatural stillness in my chest. Then slowly, the figure raised one hand and waved. I slammed the curtains shut and didn't open them again until morning. When I checked the footage, my stomach turned. The figure was tall, thin, and its head was tilted at an unnatural angle like it was studying me. Its hand didn't wave like a normal person. It twitched in short, jerky motions, almost like it was glitching. I sent the video to my landlord, demanding answers. He told me the house had been empty for over a decade, and that there was no electricity connected to it. When you live with someone, you notice their routines without even meaning to. You know the sound of their footsteps, how they slam doors, what time they usually come home. My roommate, Kelly, was a night owl. She worked at a bar and usually rolled in around 2:30 in the morning. I'd hear her jingle her keys, shuffle into her room, and shut the door with that distinct click. That's why, on the night of September 27th, when I heard her come in at 1:42 a.m., I thought nothing of it. I was already in bed scrolling on my phone when I heard her door close. 5 minutes later, I got up to grab a glass of water from the kitchen. The apartment was silent. No TV, no movement from her room. I filled my glass and happened to glance at the front door. The deadbolt was still locked from the inside. That didn't make sense. Kelly never locked it until after she was in for the night. I decided not to overthink it and went back to bed. At 3:06 a.m., I woke to the sound of her door opening. I assumed she was going to the bathroom, but when I peeked through the crack in my door, I saw nothing. Her room was open, but dark. "Kel," I whispered. No answer. I stepped inside. Her bed was made, perfectly neat, which wasn't like her. There was no bag, no shoes, no sign she'd been home at all. I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like I was being watched. That's when I heard the sound, not from inside the apartment, but from the hallway outside our door. A slow, heavy, dragging noise, like something being pulled across carpet. I froze. The sound moved past our apartment, then stopped. After a long silence, there was a knock. Not at our door, at the wall. 3 slow knocks. I backed away, heart in my throat. I grabbed my phone and called Kelly. She answered on the second ring, groggy, like I'd woken her up. She was still at work. I didn't tell her what happened until the next day. We agreed to check the building's security cameras with the landlord. The footage from that night made my skin crawl. At exactly 1:42 a.m., a tall figure in dark clothing approached our door. It stopped just outside, head tilted toward the peephole, and stayed there for 6 full minutes. Then, instead of knocking, it bent down, low, almost to the floor, and seemed to be looking under the door. After that, the figure stepped away, but didn't leave. It moved to the unit across the hall, out of view of the camera. Exactly 1 hour and 24 minutes later, the dragging sound started. The last frame we saw before the camera feed glitched was of the figure standing in the middle of the hallway, holding something long and dark in its hand. The video never recorded what happened next. Kelly moved out the following week. I stayed 1 more month, but every night I slept with a chair wedged against my door.